today we have a really, really important topic. I think all of us know innately that honesty is the best policy. But how can we build trusted donor relationships like a pro? So we're going to run through a few key tips. I'm going to hand it over to Jake to get us started.
All right, thanks so much. If you've been on enough of these, you know that we love to talk about psychology and how to predict human behavior, more specifically, how to predict donor behavior. Humans, as we always say, are very predictable, and there's really good science on to know what they do in what situations. So we try to share as much of that as we can to help maximize the impact for our missions. So this is a great way of kind of harnessing it for good instead of evil. So today we're going to talk mostly about how to build those important trusted donor relationships. This comes with the main caveat of we don't want to have attrition for our donors. Once we capture a donor, we want them to stick with us for a lifetime, ideally. That's obviously our first choice. But most nonprofits do a pretty bad job of this. The average retention rate's like 45% for donors nationally for charities. So as a whole, as an industry, we are very not good at donor retention. And a lot of it comes down to open information and trust. So we have to make sure that we're doing some of these very, very important tactics because it's about 5 to 7 times more expensive to acquire a new donor than just to keep your existing donors happy. We want as many of our donors coming back over and over and over. And a kind of our internal benchmark for Pride, we want about 80% donor retention with our clients. That's what we're aiming at with our stewardship programs and that kind of thing. But even to build these stewardship programs, we'll give you some actionable stuff toward the end. And then I want to hear, of course, from the room on what y'all do for trust and donor retention. But let's get a little bit into the psychology of it so that you can understand kind of what mechanisms are at play here. Next slide, please.
Sorry, it's being a little tricky today.
No worries. One more slide and we're there.
Even our technology needs another sip of coffee, y'all.
Yeah, seriously. Jared, can you pull up on your end as a backup just in case this goes down? I'm going to keep going as if we're going to live the dream, but in case we need to, we'll have a second PowerPoint up that we can switch hosts as kind of a backup. So in terms of defining trust, Brene Brown, one of my favorite therapist influencers. If you don't follow therapist influencers, highly recommended. You get a lot of great information. Brene Brown, obviously one of the top, most influential, most famous ones. Her book's fantastic if you haven't read it. Kind of a well-being coach, also a therapist, psychologist, kind of uses the following definition. Trust is choosing to make something important to you vulnerable to the actions of someone else. So trust is a very vulnerable thing. We're taking something that matters to us and we're putting it entirely in the hands of someone else. That's what we're defining as trust. And in terms of context of philanthropy itself, we are asking our donors to trust us with usually one of 3 things: their time, their talent, or their treasure, or their work, wealth, wisdom, depending on where in the country you're from. Their time being, we want them to walk with us, whether that's coming to events, whether that's serving as a volunteer fundraising volunteer, going to board meetings to serve as a board member, serving a volunteer in some other space, but giving some of their time for free to our organization. Their talent, we hope that these people will then connect us to others who are also passionate about the mission and can get us influence and others in the community who we don't have access to, can get us to new folks who can give. And of course, treasure. We want them to invest in us in the most literal way. Now, no one is going to make money by giving it away. So even if you say, oh, these people who they give for tax benefits, if they give away $100,000, they're not returning $100,000. It would be cheaper if they're looking just at dollars to take the tax hit on the full amount. So people who give just for tax reasons, quote unquote, are still trusting you with their money because they're still netting loss. Now, they might be redirecting a huge chunk of money towards their community, their health center, or whatever they want to do, but they're still netting loss, and that requires a lot of trust. That said, next slide. The biggest thing we can do to create trust is transparency. And a lot of times when we fail to be transparent, it's not even necessarily intentionally. So it's not the case that we're like trying to hide from donors this or that, or this went on behind the scenes, and what if our donors find out? It's just that we're not communicating at all. We're like accidentally being non-transparent about things, which can come across the same way. If your donors aren't hearing from you, whether it's intentional or not intentional, it still has the same result from the donors. So we kind of view this as an agreement between the organization and our stakeholders, whether that's the board, your donors, your committee volunteers, but their kind of pledge to you is, I'm going to give you my time, talent, and treasure. I'm going to trust you with something that's important to me and put it in your hands. And in exchange, all I want is information. I would like to know a little bit more than the average community member about what's going on with your organization, what's going on with your campaign, what's going on with your finances, what's going on with your future plans. That transparency, again, can come across either as trust or it can come across as non-trust. Whether you are actively choosing to share information or not, it doesn't matter. It comes across as intentional either way. So what we have to do is balance sharing enough insight and understanding without giving them so much information that it kind of drags them into the weeds. So we have to be smart, and this is the hard part. And we'll walk you through some strategies specifically how to do this. We have to be smart about the way that we share information and what. So kind of the timing of things as they come out. We've had several organizations in the last year change their campaign goal. At what point do you go to your volunteers and your people who've given big gifts and saying, we're changing the campaign goal, or we're changing the project slightly? I know it's still going to focus on this area, but we're adding this new thing after you've already given the gift. Well, we kind of need to tell them immediately, right? But there's a little bit of nuance that has to go into that conversation, of course. Do you send out an announcement? Do you go by one person at a time and tell them face to face? What if that takes too long? What if they hear about it from someone else? So there's a lot of nuance there we have to think about, but we have to kind of balance that. We want to share everything as openly and as transparently as we can, even if it's not the same information we're giving publicly. Like we have a news press release that goes out, we have social media posts that goes out, we have things that live on our website and in our collateral, or even things that we share with the actual news. There should be an additional layer of stuff that our immediate constituents get. And that is donors, board members, volunteers, and people who are kind of at the cross section of all of those, because a lot of our best people are all of those. And we want to make sure that they are the first to hear about new things, but you don't have to give them the whole spiel. You just need to give them the high points. And then if they have more questions, they can ask them. You can be transparent about it. But again, people say, oh yeah, I'm plenty transparent. We're not hiding anything. If you're not sharing information ongoing basis, actively with your constituents, you're not being transparent, and it's not even your fault. You're doing it by accident. And again, same end result. Same end result as if you were intentionally hiding that information. Just want to caution you, making sure that you're putting that information out consistently. All they're asking of you is just to be in the inner circle. They're giving you all this time, talent, treasure, and they just want information. Next slide. Okay. When we're talking about transparency, it should really touch kind of the following three categories. We put these in three different buckets. We need to know financially what's going on with the organization, but also with the campaign. We want to have kind of those immediate campaign updates a lot of times. And I hope in most cases, most people are doing some sort of quiet phase to launch the campaign where we're not really wasting a lot of effort, energy, and resources on marketing materials. But what we are doing is carefully tracking our finances and kind of sharing that with the different committees, with our boards, so that we have this kind of ongoing financial report that goes out. Hey, we're at 578,000. Okay, we're at 1.2. All right, we're at 2.9. And as we're kind of moving up to these numbers, that we're sharing those things on a regular basis. It might just be we drop these at the top of a committee meeting every time we have a committee meeting. Hey, here's kind of where we are financially, y'all. Just let you know where we are toward the project. Or we've spent this much so far so we can get our groundbreaking by the fall, and we still need to raise this to make sure we do this. Just kind of keeping them in the loop. The second thing is operational. So outside of the campaign, outside of the fundraising piece, they need to know a little bit about kind of the vision and where the organization is headed. You don't have to share every single thing that goes on in the executive board meeting or in the executive leadership team. There are things that like have to stay, within those groups for a little bit of time before they're launched. But as things get executed, it really is helpful to share that information and just give people future vision plans, even if they change. Saying, hey, we're not exactly sure what the plan is for the fall, but here's kind of our big pillars of what we're aiming to do. And this is a little bit about the timing. So as our campaign does this, we're looking for this in the fall and this in the spring. And this is not something that normal people would know, but since you're involved with us on a very close and intimate level, this is something we would like you to know. And the final and most important thing to share is impact. Now, this is very simple. It is, we have this status quo. This is what's happening right now. We have raised this much money And this is the new thing that's happening. So sharing that impact report, as Cindy mentioned in the comments, is absolutely critical, whether you do a formalized annual report or you just do this informally once a year, talking about, hey, you gave this much money. Collectively, the community gave this much money. As a direct result of this that we raised, we have now done this. If there is one thing you take away from today and one thing that helps you push forward in terms of, I want that donor to come back and do it again, it is positive behavior reinforcement, another psychology term that's so critical. It all has to do with impact. You see good behavior, you want them to repeat that good behavior. Best way to do that is to give them the cookie. Hey, look, this is what you did. Because of the 1.2 million that we've raised so far, we've already done this, this, and this. How exciting is that? And then we can turn that over, and it's very easy. So if we are consistently sharing impact, we say we get someone paying into a pledge over multiple years, we share impact, talk about how awesome it's going along the way, we wrap up and celebrate at the end. The conversation to have them renew that pledge is very easy. We obviously want to ask no more than once a year, but if we can ask every 3 or 4 years for a big multi-year commitment, and that's it, and they get really used to hearing from us, oh, we're so excited, y'all are awesome, this is all the cool stuff that we've done as a result just of the community's generosity, that's big. It's also the thing that most charities do the least well. When you're first starting out and you don't have a lot of experience, even if you're sharing updates and information, not drawing the line of, we got this specific money, which did this specific thing, is so easy and so important. And if you just do that, you're ahead of 95% of charities in your town. It puts you into the top 1 in 20 of charities who do this well and puts you out in front of all of those people. So with that said, we're going to dig a little bit into the specifics and some actionable things that y'all can take away. I'm going to turn it over to Jenna.
Thank you so much, Jake. Some really great tips. Now, how do we make it practical? How do we actually do these wonderful things that we want to do for our donors, especially when we're a one-person development shop? Or depending on the size of our organization, if you're an executive director that wears all the hats, including fundraising, let's leverage our technology. So do you have a place on your website where you can easily update weekly, monthly? Are you already on social media? Do you have a monthly newsletter? And let's just go ahead and build that bank of content, right? When you get an amazing impact story, put it in that bank of content, and then you can throw it into your easy peasy monthly newsletter template, right? Don't wait. You don't have to use all the stories at once, but just put them in the can so they're ready to go every month or whatever the cadence of that communication is. Simple, direct lines to your stakeholders. I don't know how many of you have incorporated it, but in the past, we have used video in the organizations that I've served. And like, if you have a TikTok account, you know the content does not have to be perfect. It does not have to be film quality. People want real, this sort of back and forth engagement. Shoot a quick update video, send it in an email or a text message to some of your closest donors. I know we've got folks that are already doing this, especially if you have kids on your campus, sending a donor or a parent a photo of their child doing something adorable. That is an amazing touch point. It's great stewardship, and it's an easy use of your time and technology. When we talk about consistent reporting, we know that our organizations are already running recurring financial reports. We are doing certain reports monthly or quarterly for our board, for our advisory councils. Is there a way that you could just simply adapt that standard canned report that your organization's already pulling? Could you use that as a really basic infographic to sort of tell the story on the data side? You tie that to the impact and those warm and fuzzy photos and videos like Jake mentioned, and that's going to show folks money equals opportunity for this organization and this mission, right? Think about ways that you can use your campaign trackers. Again, we all have these sort of paper dashboards at our offices. How do we make it simple and automated, preferably, so that we can just put that out there? It doesn't have to be super tech heavy. Encouraging two-way dialogue. Yes, we want to report out. Yes, we want to provide constant updates and input and impact statements, but we also want to seek our most impactful donors' input, right? Going to someone in a powerful position and telling them, I really want to get your input on this next phase of our growth, our expansion, our possible campaign. You don't have to implement all of their feedback, right? Realistically, you probably won't be able to implement it all, but asking for their opinion, genuinely listening to their suggestions is going to go a long, long way in building rapport and letting them understand that this is a two-way process. You're a partner in what we're doing. It is absolutely going to make them feel more involved, more engaged, and that their continued giving can be even more impactful. We always, always encourage our clients to be sure to share important third-party evaluations, right? Did your hospital receive a five-star institutional review? Did you, as an organization, or maybe a member of your staff, receive some community award, right? Telling these stories is not bragging. It's showing that we are sustainable, we are impactful, and we are doing meaningful work within our own mission and within our broader community. All of those are things that are going to enlighten your stakeholders because they don't know what else you guys are involved in, who else is looking and tracking the work that you're doing. But it's also going to help them continue to build confidence in the work that they're funding. So I think it's important for us to all take a moment to brag on ourselves from time to time. So take this time, pop in the chat, tell us about recent accolades and impactful achievements or milestones. It doesn't have to be related to fundraising. Anything that shows the strength of the organization is going to impact a donor's willingness to give more meaningfully. So while you guys share your tips, let's go on to the next slide. All right. As Jake mentioned, we are big, big fans of Brene Brown. I hope you guys have heard of this before. Fun fact, when I shared notes for these slides, Trish actually reached out and said, my son's high school incorporates the braving principles. So everybody needs this in our life. I think it is especially meaningful to attach this to the work that we do as fundraisers, right? So her braving principles start with boundaries. So we have to know our institutional boundaries on reporting. Many of us are impacted by HIPAA, right? So health information. Some of us might be impacted by FERPA, which is related to student rights and information exchange, very similar. The organizational culture, what your board members and your leadership are comfortable with. All of those are going to play into our institutional boundaries, what we can ethically, legally, and responsibly share openly with our constituents. We also need to understand our donor boundaries. Are there areas where they are just not comfortable? I think the most important way that we see this as fundraisers is with donor recognition, naming. If someone wants to be anonymous, by golly, we better make them anonymous. And that means at the tightest level of information control we can possibly create within our organization. If they don't want their name on it, they don't want their name on anything. Okay, respect it. What other boundaries do they have? Are there personal conversations, family illnesses? Those are things that are good for us to know. We often come in contact with very intimate details as fundraisers. We know a lot about our donors' lives. How do we respectfully maintain that information, but also keep it very close to the vest and trusted within the bounds of our relationship? The R is for reliability. Know your limits, know your bandwidth. If you cannot do the thing the donor has asked you to do in 24 hours, do not promise that you will get it to them in 24 hours. It is so hard sometimes to negotiate a timeline with a person that is in a role of importance, right? But when we are transparent and we can convey to them our bandwidth and be genuine about the promises that we're making and then deliver on those promises as we agreed to do, that's going to build trust. They're going to know that Jenna does what she says she's going to do, and that we can count on her in this leadership role within the organization that we're supporting. And we have to remember, no matter what our titles are as fundraisers, we are in a leadership position in our organizations, no matter the org chart. The donors believe we have a voice at the table. We have to be reliable with that voice. Accountability. Again, this is going to go really both ways in a relationship. We will all make mistakes as fundraisers, as humans, as donors. We are going to be fallible at times. If we miss a deadline or a deliverable, or we forget to call the board chair at 10 a.m. because we got tied up, let's own it. Let's apologize. Let's be very direct and clear. Hey, I missed the mark on that. Can you give me 24 hours and I'm going to have that turned around for you, right? Let's just be honest. Let's not over promise. We always want to over deliver. Let's see. And last, this one is, I think, particularly important as a Southern woman, especially. I grew up in a culture of small town chatter, right? Gossip sometimes means you love everybody that you know. Sometimes means I'm praying for you because I know you're in a hard time, right? And I want others to pray for you. But a lot of times it means we're just gossiping. And that is how we will quickly break down trust with a donor or a prospect or a key stakeholder. Um, Everything that you are told is in the vault. Okay. And I know many of us have CRMs and databases that require contact reports when we meet with clients. Do you guys have policies at your organizations about what does or does not get input in a contact report? Have you thought about what is and is not ethically appropriate to document in our databases? Lots of important things that we gather in a meeting that will help us develop deeper relationships and strategy. But we have to remember, um, at the end of the day, Brene Brown says the vault is basically you respect my story and I will respect yours. The things you share with me that are personal or intimate stay in the vault. Okay. Go on to the next slide. I want to take a look. Some great comments. Oh, hey, Hannah, top 100 rural hospital. Fabulous accolade. Level 5 partner with the We Honor Veterans program. Way to go, Cindy and Life Care. All right, you guys, integrity, choosing courage over comfort. Again, this is a really important value that I think we have to have as fundraisers. We have to understand our values as individuals, as organizational representatives, and we have to live in those values even when it is awkward or difficult. At Academy last week, we talked about controversial donors for potential naming opportunities, right? So if you are a faith-based organization, is your organization culture willing to accept a major gift from a casino or a tobacco industry, right? Those are things that we have to determine as an organization and as individual fundraisers. We have to choose courage to live in our values and do that with integrity. And I believe that our donors and our relationships will reciprocate in kind. Non-judgment, that's our N. So being vulnerable with someone can be risky and it can be frightening, but we have to go into that assuming that they are not judging us. And when they are in turn vulnerable with us, we want to give them empathy. We want to show them that we are genuinely listening, that we are really repeating back their concerns. We've heard it, and we're going to see what we can do to address those concerns, again, without judgment. No pressure, no judgment. Lastly, generosity. Brown says that our relationship is only a trusting relationship if you can assume the most generous thing about my words, intentions, or behaviors. If you assume the best, right? Give grace. And then you can follow up and check in. You can clarify if there was uncertainty in the conversation. You can clarify the timing that the donor intends to make that gift because we assume they will, in fact, come through with the gift that they have verbally committed to, right? We have to be generous in our non judgment, I think, is how I would sum that up. I would love to hear from you guys in the chat or raise your virtual hands. Which of these braving principles comes most naturally to you? Are there some of these principles that you think are really, really difficult? Maybe they're a challenge. It's an area you need to work on. I would love to hear your thoughts on the braving principles. And then let's move into any questions. We are very close to time, but I want to make sure that we have time for conversation and feedback as well. Next slide, Trish. Awesome. Let's see. Giving out 30 micro urgent need grants in the first 90 days of the year. Georgia Academy of Family Physicians, I can imagine the flurry of paperwork and activity that went into that. Our agency, we talked about that, Cindy, the We Honor Veterans program. That's amazing. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how that came about